Asmita, and I welcome you all on behalf of Jamshedpur Management Association. So JMA has started this new initiative called BAKE, Business Acumen and Knowledge by Experts, where various academic and industrial experts will be sharing their knowledge and interacting. For the second session today, we are very pleased to have Mr. Neeraj Kant, who is the Managing Director of Indian Steel and Wire Products. Let me try and give a brief introduction of Sir. So Mr. Neeraj Kant is currently the Managing Director, as I mentioned. He has been in this position since 2013. Prior to his assignment, he was part of marketing and sales team of Tata Steel as All India Head of Retail Marketing. He was closely involved in the development of Tata Tiscon brand. In fact, he was the project leader of the first ever retail value management initiative of Tata Steel way back in 2002. Mr. Kant is a BTech from IIT Kanpur, and he has done his MBA from the Edinburgh University Management School. He has also attended executive education program at France. On a special assignment from Tata Steel, he had done detailed mapping and survey of the steel market of South Africa in 2011. He is a well-known person in the steel industry of India. Mr. Neeraj Kant was the chairman of CII Jharkhand last year and is currently a member of CII Eastern Regional Council. He is a member of National Committee of CII on Ease of Doing Business. He is associated with professional bodies like Jamshedpur Management Association, Institute of Engineers, etc. He has won several awards and recognitions for his contributions to business and society. In today's session, Mr. Kant will bring in practitioners' perspective on marketing and branding. With his depth of understanding, he would share his views and experiences on how commodities can be branded and what are the challenges faced by marketers in the brand development journey. Mr. Kant would make his presentation for about 1 hour 10 minutes, and subsequently we will take some questions from the participants for about 20 minutes. So before I hand it over to Sir, I request everyone to please put their microphones on mute and videos turned off. We can take the questions at the end of the session.
Thank you, Asmita. This is Neeraj Kant. Asmita, can I be heard clearly?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, participants, for sparing out time and joining this session. If you ask, 10 people that what is a brand, you will get possibly 10 different answers. So I do not want to get into the theoretical description of marketing and branding in today's session. As Asmita had mentioned, it will be more of a practitioner's perspective. I have been part of marketing and sales team for years together. And hence I would like to talk something, very fundamental and basic about commodities and brands. And subsequently, for marketers in this session, there will be some small tips on how to brand commodities and how to do a good marketing work out of their brands. I must mention that I don't claim that the knowledge which I'll be sharing today is an original work. It is not an R&D. It is not something which has been patented by me. It is drawn primarily on my experience in the marketing and sales teams over the years. Also, I would be sharing some of my learnings which I have got through various conferences and seminars which I have attended, and also various articles which I have been reading primarily from McKinsey's, Bain's, Harvard Business Review, etc. Before I begin this session, I understand that there are non-marketeers in this session, and I welcome them because this would not be a very highly, so to say, technical session. It will be a very practical description of what can be done, and marketing and branding, I often feel is more like an elaboration of the obvious. So it will not be a very technical session. There are people in this session who are not into B2C marketing, but into B2B marketing. And often it is felt that branding is only relevant to a B2C scenario, where you want to sell a flashy product to individual customers, and it is not relevant to businesses, and it is difficult to engage audience emotionally and with a brand when you are selling a technical product or a complex solution. So I would say that is not entirely wrong. B2C does refer more, branding does refer more to a B2C scenario. But let me tell you, friends, it is less common in B2B, but it is very relevant. And a recent research shows that almost 50% of B2B buyers are more likely to make a purchase if they connect emotionally to the brand. I mean, we have examples of brands like Microsoft or IBM or even General Electric, selling huge volumes to businesses. And I think this session would be relevant to people who are both into B2C as well as B2B. On your screens, you would see a number. I think there is a time gap between my changing the slides and the same appearing, but we live with it. So, this, if you count the zeros, this is number is 300 crores. Now, 300 crores is what is the brand value of Mr. Amitabh Bachchan in our film industry. Now, what is this brand value of 300 crore which this actor enjoys? So, is it something which he enjoys because of his acting? It is because he's a great actor and hence, people value him. His brand value is 300 crores. If that be so, then what about actors like the ones on your screen? They have been great actors in their own right, whether it is Anupam Kher or whether it is Nana Patekar. But obviously, these actors do not enjoy the same kind of brand value which an Amitabh Bachchan enjoys. So is brand value related to functional appeal only? So in its very basic form, a brand is a combination of functional and emotional appeal. It is layered with tangible benefits as well as intangible benefits, and often people commit the mistake of relating functional to tangible and emotional to intangible. Everything which cannot be measured or which cannot be seen obviously is related to emotions, and something which can be measured is actually functional, but that is not entirely true. There can be emotional benefits which are tangible in nature, and vice versa. And the power of a brand lies in its ability to influence purchasing behavior. So this is the case with the example which I gave of Mr. Amitabh Bachchan. This is how he influences the audience. We have seen how his brand works. We saw him advertising for polio drops across the country, and it had a huge impact on the common man. So that is, the words from such a person are actually influencing the behavior of the customer, so to say, in this case, the common man of India. And that is where the brand appeal really lies. It is a function of both tangible and intangible aura. It is a function of functional and emotional appeal of a person. And it is not related to something like acting in the case of Amitabh Bachchan, or a functional appeal. So, functional appeal normally is like a good quality product. So what? Everybody makes a good quality product. So, I'll get into this more as we go along. But just to describe these functional and emotional parameters, because many people feel ki, what is all this, functional and emotional? So, if you see on various performance components, and these are slides which could be useful for practicing marketers when they are getting into analysis of their tangible and intangible benefits of their brands and products. So for example, a typical functional or a tangible benefit of a product could be that I use a very good raw material for making my product. or the mechanical and physical properties of my product are really good, or my product is customized, so I give you the sizes which you want, or I have a full basket, I have a full range of product which I can give it to you when you demand. So these are typical tangible benefits, or the functional benefits of a product. On the other hand, if you see, there are certain intangibles, so to say, an aura created around a product. So if it is known that a product uses cutting edge technology, people may not be well versed with what kind of a technology a product uses, but if that perception is there, if that connect is there, then these become some sort of emotional connecting intangible benefits. You see, ISO, or a total productive maintenance company, a company has got so and so rewards and recognition, so it must be a good company. Let me relate to that product. The company is reliable. It has, it has a value for its commitment. If this company says that I will deliver to you within 10 days, it will deliver on the ninth day. This kind of reliability which is created, in the perception of customers. Consistency, not only the quality, the service, other aspects of the company are consistent. They are 10 out of 10. It is not that, if you call up the company, somebody picks up the telephone immediately 9 out of 10 times, but on the 10th time, the company may not, respond properly. So these are aspects of consistency. And then, of course, perceived quality. There's a great example of a Toyota ad, which I have with me, but perhaps due to internet bandwidth issues, I may not be able to share this movie with you. But this ad simply, you see, there are two gentlemen driving on a very deserted national highway, and they see before them at a distance, they see that a car has broken down, the bonnet is open, and there is a beautiful girl who is standing and who's trying to, repair the car, and who perhaps is looking for help. And both these two gentlemen who are in a car, they get very excited, because they get an opportunity to help a beautiful girl stranded on a highway. So both of them smile at each other, and they start planning to stop the car and to come to the rescue of this girl. And suddenly, when they reach very close to this car, the driver actually speeds up the car, rushes and goes past by this girl. So the other gentleman sitting next to him is very upset. He says, "What are you doing? You were supposed to stop and help this beautiful girl standing out there." And so this man says, "No, it is a trap. I saw this car was a Toyota, and have you ever seen a Toyota breaking down?" And immediately after that, this girl supposedly removes the mask, and he's a highway dacoit sort of a person who's wanting these two people to stop so that he can rob him. So very effective ad. This is a perceived quality of a product. People perceive that Toyota can never break down. So this is an intangible benefit. It creates that emotional connect, with the customer. On distribution, you see, a lot of us, this is again more related to B2C, but it could be relevant for a B2B scenario also. Distribution, the ordering process. So, it's very easy. I can order online, and I have a connectivity with the procurement department, availability response to inquiries, delivery at site, lead time. All these, things are very, very tangible benefits. They are equivalent to acting for Amitabh Bachchan or acting for Nana Patekar. These are functional benefits. These are tangible benefits. What are the intangible benefits on distribution? Again, reliability, courtesy, ease of doing ordering, reputation of a retailer. You see, if you sell your product through an outlet which doesn't enjoy a good reputation, the owner of that outlet has been behind the bars for several times for committing several crimes, it will not do good to your brand. The reputation of a retailer is a huge connect as far as customers are concerned with the particular brand. The ambience of the outlet. When a customer visits the outlet of your brand, what is the ambience you have created? Does anybody come to offer a glass of water or maybe a cold drink to the customer? Is there a nice place for a customer to sit and talk to customers? You see, all these are intangible benefits of a distribution performance components. Support services, functional benefits, technical support, application support, financial support, I have so many people in the field who can actually come to help you in times of crisis. Often companies take a lot of pride in these tangible benefits which they offer to customers, but believe you me, these are very, very hygiene functional benefits in today's world, which you can offer in terms of support services to customers. The notions of service quality, I gave the example of Toyota, which was a typical example of a product quality notion, but there are notions of service quality which are there. Degree of rapport and understanding between the service provider and the customer. And as far as the company is concerned, there are a lot of parameters which form the functional benefits for customers. So customers do look at financial stability of a company. They look at profits, how much the company spends on advertisements, and how is the manpower of the company. But I think what they more want to see is the reputation. These days, customers are very conscious, particularly I must say the younger generation of customers. They are really looking at the company from a different perspective. They look whether this company has social commitments. They look whether this company has sustainability commitments, whether this company is environment friendly. They look at the quality image of the company. They look at the technical potential of the company, and they look at the trustworthiness and the overall reputation of the company. As a great example is of Tata Group, where the level of trust and the kind of reputation which the group enjoys is tremendous. I mean, one has to actually see to believe what kind of a respect this group, this private sector group gets, in terms of a company's reputation. And these are all the intangible benefits that are perceived by a customer. I would a bit talk about the USP, the unique selling proposition of a company, because this is also related to a brand. This is through your branding efforts, you try to create and a particular top of the mind recall in consumers' mind. You see, I'll give you a very quick time because the time is very limited. The diamond company, De Beers, they came up with this tagline: "A diamond is forever." This was way back in 1948, and in fact, in Advertising Age magazine, it's a magazine which named this as the best slogan of the 20th century. Diamond is unbreakable. Of course, it lasts forever. And they actually converted this whole diamond buying thing into a symbol for eternal love. People started using diamond rings for weddings and engagements. So this "a diamond is forever," this slogan was the USP. It described more like a emotional connect of people with this particular brand. Another great example of a functional USP is Domino's Pizza. You get fresh hot pizza delivered to your door in 30 minutes, or else it's free for you. So this was, so whenever you think about Domino's, definitely this particular things come to your mind, that this 30 minutes or less, or it's free. So these are the USPs which you have to build for your brand going forward. And USP is generally one particular proposition of your brand. Your brand could constitute several tangible and intangible benefits, but one particular benefit should be converted into some sort of a USP. But USP is, before I go further in the USP thing, I want to tell people in this session that, you see, you have to differentiate between a consumer, between a product and a brand. A product or a service is something which is produced in a factory, and a brand is something that actually is bought by a customer. Now, this is a very powerful slide. It shows that if you have not converted your product into a brand, you would invariably, in 9 out of 10 cases, you will have a disconnect with your consumer. A brand a product can be copied by a competitor. A brand is unique. We have thousands and thousands of examples. Levi's jeans is one of them. and a product can be quickly outdated, and a successful brand is timeless. I mean, Coca-Cola has used right from Marilyn Monroe to Katrina Kaif as their brand ambassadors. And if some of us would remember the entry of Double Seven way back in 1977, when the Morarji government actually banned Coca-Cola within India, and Double Seven actually survived for only 3 years. So the brands are timeless, and that is one thing which is extremely important about brands. So these are, and brands need not be only products as we perceive products to be. I mean, Shankar Puchka Wala in Calcutta or a Parathe Wali Gali in Delhi, is a great brand. In Jamshedpur we have a Kevat Litti, which has never been advertised. China and Japan are brands in themselves. You have a perception of poor quality from China, and you have a perception of great quality coming from Japan. So brands could be anything, from individuals to companies to products to any outlets serving food. So just this is some statistics. Apple currently is the most valuable brand in the world. I mean, and also I would maybe not touch upon this aspect in this session, but there's a lot of debate and discussion on brand value, brand equity, and brand premium. So all these three are often used interchangeably. They are supposed to be similar, but they are not the same. So I don't want to make this session a very technical MBA school sort of a session, but just for the information of all of you, these are different parameters. Brand value is primarily numbers, financial number. If I was to buy Apple brand today without paying anything for the manufacturing assets of Apple, then I have to pay these many million pounds, what is there on your screen. So roughly it talks of financial numbers. It talks of a number which, if your brand was to be assetized, what would be that number? Similarly, in India, latest HDFC Bank is the most valuable brand, and it is interesting to see the numbers. I gave example of Amitabh Bachchan, but our friend Virat Kohli is $237 million. That is the brand valuation. So brand valuation is more connected to the scarcity. How much, if you had 10 Virat Kohlis, then the Virat Kohli brand value would go down, because then Virat Kohli becomes replaceable. But if if there is a uniqueness, if there is no scope for replacement of a particular brand, typically the brand value in terms of $1 million is high. While brand equity is something which is in the eyes of customers. So typically brand equity is measured in terms of certain indexes, and there are hazard models and hazard formulas to measure brand equity. But it is how your customer measures your brand. How important is that brand to your customer? If it is very, very important to a customer, the brand equity would be very high. So brand equity is not about a financial number. It is more about what is the impression in the minds of customers about your brand. So coming to commodities and brands, this again is a little busy slide. People who are non-marketeers may like to skip it during the presentation also, but I am giving this brief because these are I would say metrics which can help marketers in their day-to-day branding work. They can actually for example, people who are into marketing and sales, if your product does not have perceptible difference, if customer is always in doubt about the quality of your product, if he always wants to pay the lowest price, if your product can be easily substituted, if your product has a low involvement, it's not a major decision for customers to buy a product, then you are into a commodity business. And for people again outside the profession, commodity, whenever you want to describe a commodity, you can always imagine potatoes and onions in your mind. So everything what I have mentioned here is relevant. So you go to buy potatoes in a vegetable market, you don't see perceptible difference. You will always look at quality. You would never pay, always pay the lowest price and stuff like that. While for a brand, you create value for customers through differentiation. Evian bottle of water, it is, incidentally, I'm told this costs about 600 rupees a bottle, and Virat Kohli is actually regularly drinking this water, and he consumes 5 liters. In fact, he's spending about 10 lakhs per annum on buying Evian water, because for what? Maybe the quality of water is more or less the same that you get elsewhere, but this is a water which has taken 15 years to travel down from the Alps, from southeastern France, to reach to a particular source, and they use the bottle which is the best recyclable bottle material in the world, and stuff like that. So the differentiation created by Evian is such that people are paying 600 rupees for a liter of water. The brand customer trusts the quality. I mean, do you ever buying a Colgate toothpaste, do you want to check its quality? Are you in doubt whether this particular tube which I am buying is actually good or not? And a customer has a perceived value about a brand, and this I would talk, this is a very powerful concept, and I will talk about it a little later. But Apple is the glaring example. I mean, Apple mobiles are launched and people go and pay a lakh of rupees to buy a mobile which is actually sold for 40,000 rupees within 2 years. So there is a perceived value in a new model which is much more than the functional appeal, which is much more than the components, the sum of the costs of all the components that Apple has used. There is a perceived value which is 1 lakh. The cost of that Apple phone could be 10,000 rupees or maybe less. So this is what the brand perceived value is all about. And the last is on this customer front is the loyalty. Does the customer have loyalty with your product? Does he comes for repeat purchases? Coke and Pepsi have one of the highest loyal customers in the world. 90% customers of Coke and 90% customers of Pepsi don't change brands. And there are cases where one child in a house is a Coke loyal and the other one is a Pepsi loyal, and there is a fight, and there is never a case where people jump brands, customers jump brands in this case. As far as industry is concerned, if your company gives one product for all customers and you have a mindset that have the product, then we'll find the customers, then you are into a commodity business. Are you into mass production? Is volume a very major parameter that you really monitor? Is it a very important KPI in your company? Is price discount sole basis of competition? Are you low on business ethics? So business ethics doesn't only mean non-payment of taxes, but it is also the commitment value, the transparency which you exercise about. I mean, if you are giving a test certificate for any product, is that test certificate relevant to that particular heat or that particular identity of that material? So business ethics encompasses all these values. I mean, often we confuse ethics with bribing or embezzling or stuff like that. Business ethics is much more than that. Are you into opportunistic pricing? Do you have that tendency to increase prices midway into the month because the market is going up and you want to get that extra mullah from your customer going forward? Are you into very volatile, seasonal, fragmented, scattered markets? If all these parameters are true for your product and for your industry, then friends, you have to relook. You are into commodity business. In brands, you have to really find what customer wants, and this again I would dwell a little later. But customers, the latent needs of customers. Customer may not spell out everything what he or she wants. The latent need, the unexpressed needs. Walkman, for instance. Never a customer went and told Sony that I want something which I can actually listen to music while I am jogging. Walkman actually found out this latent need that it will be very nice if we could offer a product to a customer, and he would be so happy that he can listen to his favorite music while he is jogging in the park. So these are, and it is very important to many a times we impose our impressions on customers that my customer wants this. Arey, how do you know it? Have you done a proper structured research? Have you gone and met your customers across the length and breadth of the country? Or you are sitting on your, I sometimes, call it desktop intuitions, We sit on in our offices, customer ko to quality mangta hai, and he wants the lowest price. This is what is our general impression. But I later describe how these myths are so wrong, so incorrect. Customer has to be the central focus of a brand. It is not the product. How many KPIs your management reviews which are related to customer? There are company boards across the world in multinationals and in big good companies, listed companies, where if there are 10 board members, when they have a board meeting, they have 11 chairs. One chair is left empty, vacant, and that chair is supposed to be the customer's chair. And any decision which the company takes, they actually test it out whether that decision has a favorable impact on the customer. If it doesn't have, they avoid taking such a decision. And this is not an anecdote, I'm telling you the reality. And many of you may know this, that there are empty chairs for customers in many progressive boards in the world, just because they do not want to lose sight of the customer. The third point about the brand is maximizing customer lifetime value. Now, this is again an extremely important KPI. What is a lifetime value? Suppose you are making 1,000 rupees profit from one particular customer, and you are selling 100 units of a product to this customer. So you are making 1 lakh of profits from this customer every month. And if you are, suppose you estimate that your relationship with this customer would be there for next 5 years. So then next 5 years, that means 12 lakhs per year and 60 lakhs per annum. So your customer lifetime value is actually 60 lakhs. And if you further stretch this concept, then companies actually calculate something which is called customer equity, which is the sum total of all the lifetime values of all your customers discounted to the present value. It's like NPV, net present value. But coming back to customer lifetime value, this is such an important KPI, and it is a lead KPI. It is not a lag indicator like a market share, or a EBITDA. These are all very lag indicators of measuring businesses. Lead indicators, I will talk about it a little later, are like, customer lifetime value. And this Nordstrom, which is a fashion retailer in the US, there's a classical story, this customer who's a very loyal customer of Nordstrom actually walks into the store and he wants to return a tire iron. Tire iron is typically an iron rod which is used to change the tires. These days with tubeless tires, it is no more used. But earlier, this was a very common thing which people used to keep in houses. And Nordstrom actually doesn't manufacture or sell tire irons. And this customer walks into a Nordstrom store and he's very angry. He says, I want to give this back, this tire iron, this is bad and this and that. He was very upset. And this lady sitting on the desk knows this customer, and she quickly checks on the system. And he says that he bought this for $17 and he wants to give it back. And he was very upset, and he had come a long distance from his home to give this back to Nordstrom store. So this lady actually checks, and she found that the lifetime value of this customer is something like $20,000. And she immediately takes a decision, and she takes back this product and gives back $17 to this customer, because she did not want to upset the lifetime value of this customer, which was $10,000. And she was talking about $17. So these are stories wherein, I'm not saying, that everybody should start taking back products which they don't manufacture or sell. But what I'm trying to say is that LTV is an extremely, or CLV as it is mostly called, customer lifetime value, is an extremely important parameter for any business to ensure that they have that required customer equity going forward. And then the last point on industry is creating uncontested market space and making competition irrelevant. This is Netflix. I would touch upon this more a little later, but this is also, some of you would have studied the Blue Ocean Strategy book, but I would talk about it very briefly a little later. But this is also one of the attributes of a brand, in any particular scenario. The last parameter on which I want to distinguish between or differentiate between commodities and brands is channel. If your dealers are pushing the product, if they are opportunistic, they shift loyalties, they are speculative, they want to hold inventories just because prices are going to increase, they are very low on service, they lack transparency, they don't want to share their data with you, again you are in a commodity space. But if you are in a space of a brand, your distributors have a long-term commitment. Classic example is Tata Steel distributors. It's not only Tata Steel distributors, it is Tata Steel partners. A lot of the external partners of Tata Steel have worked for generations. The grandfather worked, the father worked, and the son is now working, and Tata Steel is looking to prepare the son's son, to take over the business. So that is the leadership planning, or the the family leadership change planning which is being done by companies. If your retailer takes pride in his association with the brand, this is also a very important attribute of brands, and they would be providing required customer support, after sales service, and above all, in case of other things also this was mentioned, they are ethical. Business is done in an ethical and transparent manner. As I mentioned that, I would talk about, I spoke about Domino's pizza example, that you get it free if it is more than 30 minutes, and De Beers, the diamond is forever. But, it is to be kept in mind that a USP must, make a proposition to the customer by providing a certain specific benefit which is unique. That is the biggest point in a USP. It should not be offered by some other competitors. The moment it is offered by some other competitor, it no more remains a USP. And the last one is that your USP must be strong enough to pull new customers to the product. So it should not be that you are perceiving it to be a great thing, but the customer is not. So three things important for describing a brand value proposition as a USP is that it should describe a specific benefit, then it should not be provided by a competitor, and it should be a pull for the customer. Now this is something which is extremely important. Now I would like to quickly touch upon two very powerful concepts. I would not go into much detail, and these concepts, ladies and gentlemen, are relevant in many areas of working. So it is not sort of marketing and sales, fundas. But for example, I would like to talk about the perception of value versus actual price or perceived price. Don't get awed by this graphical representation. I would give very simple examples. Suppose your product price is 10,000 rupees, but the value which the customer perceives in your product, he feels that this product's value should be approximately 7,000 rupees. So your perceived value is less than the actual price. That is, you are on the left hand side of this line, value equivalence line. You are on the left hand side because your perceived price is higher than the value which you are giving. Your customer will generally not buy the product. A typical case is like D, C, and B cases are where your value perceived is same as price. So that is a very normal, so I find that this product price is 10,000 and the value I perceive is 10,000. So good, if I need this product, I will buy it. Not a great pull for the product. But if your price is 10,000 and the perceived value is 12,000, there'll be a rush to buy a product. The Apple case which I mentioned, why do you buy a 1 lakh rupees phone, even in spite of knowing that the manufacturing price of this phone would be 10,000, 15,000 at best, because your perceived value is very high. Apple has a value advantage. It is on the right side of this line, which is called the value equivalence line. And the value which you generate for a customer, going by the example of the 10,000 rupees product, if the value perceived is 12,000, you have actually generated a customer value of 2,000 rupees. Your product is priced at 10,000. Customer, sees it as a 12,000 rupees value. So this, I was saying that this is the POV, perception of value, is such a powerful concept. It is true even in our real lives as individuals. Many of us work in organizations, and we say that, I'm a great guy. I'm very honest, efficient. I do my work. I am fantastic. I have so much of knowledge, but still I am not getting promoted. But still I am, because the management or your bosses do not see that perceived value. They perhaps see a lesser value in you than what you may be thinking. So, you may think that 10,000 rupees is a great price for the customer because, I'm giving a great product for 10,000, but the customer doesn't perceive it. He only sees it at 7,000 or 5,000 rupees, and hence he's not buying it. So, friends, this perception of value, if actually I was to ask to describe the entire process of branding in just one sentence, I would say that branding is all about increasing the POV of your product, or the perception of value of your product. And perception of value is not all gas and all stuff like putting some fancy posters on television or hoardings. No, it is all the parameters which I described in earlier slides. It is about product value. It is about business ethics. It is about commitment. It is about reliability. If you do not have a product quality, you can never, build a brand, and hence you can never have a perceived value of your product as far as customer is concerned. So there is a great feeling that somebody is not good, but through advertising means or through showcasing means, somebody or some product is rated very highly by people. I don't agree to that. Perception of value has to be created with both functional, emotional appeal, with both tangible, intangible, functions. And hence, in our real life, if some of my relative doesn't like me because he doesn't perceive a good value in me, maybe I am rude to him. I may be a very nice person, but I have not been able to create a perception of value in the eyes of that relative of mine. So this is such a powerful concept and such a simple concept, that there is something which is perception of value, and there is something which is called actual price. And actual and perceived price are more or less same things. Don't get confused here, because perceived price is generally the price which is finally landed at my premises and all that. So you only go by actual price and perception of value. And many a times marketeers are only busy in deciding the actual price of the product. We hardly spend time in doing things which do good to the perceived value of the product. And that is, many of my B2B customer friends attending this session would say that, how do I create a perception of value when I am selling a product to the government department because they are wanting a price on L1 basis? How does the government decide to engage McKinsey's? Do they go by L1 process? So if there is a Neeraj Khan consultancy and I apply to the government, McKinsey is charging 10 crores and I will do that work in 10 lakhs. Will I get that work? Is it only functional thing that a company should have 10 years of experience, company should have itna billion turnover? Is it only that? No. It is a complete perception of value. The government gives crores and crores to McKinsey's, not based on L1. And I am of the firm belief that a time will come, and it is up to us. It is up to us marketers that we show value to the government. If there is a road construction contract, can a bidder say that this is the lifetime value which I am giving? Say for the next 20 years, if this road doesn't require repair, then the government is actually saving X crores. Has any supplier or vendor come up with a lifetime value offering to customers, including government? So this perception that government is only working on L1 is not correct. And it is the onus and responsibility of people like us to push government into getting more and more oriented towards evaluating the perceived value, the tangible and intangible benefits of a product, and then we can actually bring in branding as a more popular method within the B2B business. But going forward, as I said, this is a very powerful concept. It can be utilized in any scenario. Now, friends, I would briefly, as I mentioned, I would like to describe about this blue ocean strategy. Many of you would have read. This is one of the most iconic and impactful strategy books ever written. This is by Chan Kim and René Mauborgne. They are professors at INSEAD, France. And Red Oceans, I mean, you can read the stuff which is written on the slide. But typically, you see, this describes a scenario wherein all the industries are existing today. The industries boundaries are defined, and there is a cutthroat competition. Companies try to outperform each other's. They want to grab your market share. The market space is getting crowded. Profits are getting reduced. So it's like a bloodbath. That is why it is called a red ocean. All sharks fighting inside an ocean, and the ocean water is red. It actually describes a scenario of a bloody competition, and hence this term red ocean. The blue ocean strategy, which creates uncontested market space, is denotes industries which are not in existence today. It is a market space which is not tainted by competition. Here you create demand. Rather than fighting for market space, you create demand, and there is an ample opportunity for growth going forward. In blue oceans, typically competition is irrelevant because you change the rules of the game. And it's typically it's like you play maybe kabaddi in your pastime. Somebody may be playing kho, and you want to have a competition with Virat Kohli. Obviously, you can't do anything in cricket, But if you actually change the rules to a kabaddi or a kho, perhaps you will be able to beat a Virat Kohli, or maybe you don't have a Virat Kohli in that space. So typically, you see, from a fierce competition to making competition irrelevant, this is a blue ocean is a scenario. Instead of chasing customers, you have actually customers who seek you out. And in a blue ocean, instead of downward pricing pressure, you have an upward pricing possibility. And I give quickly, because paucity of time, you see iTunes. iTunes typically, in around 2003, if I am correct, there's a lot of illegal downloading of digital music, and people had to pay for a full CD to download one song. And herein where iTunes actually created an uncontested space in the digital music arena. They actually tied up with song recording houses like EMI, Sony, Warner Brothers, and they started selling digital music. Customers could buy one song of their choice. It was very nominal payment, and they gave this almost 70% payment to the recording companies. So this was a new uncontested space they created for themselves. Of course, others will follow over a period of time. But I think this is a classic example of iTunes. Canon actually introduced the personal desktop copiers. Earlier, companies like Xerox and other companies were making large corporate copiers which were purchased by corporates. And Canon actually changed the rules of the game. Individual secretary also started keeping a small copier on her desktop. NetJets, you see, fractional jet ownership. NetJets has 700 aircrafts today. And just to give you a sense, a company like, say, Vistara has about 29 aircrafts. NetJets has 700 aircrafts, and instead of buying aircrafts, many CEOs, they actually owned a jet in a fractional manner, and they would get a chartered aircraft whenever they wanted. They don't have to take commercial airlines. These are examples of uncontested market space. Netflix, for example, they started with movie rental suppliers, and then they went on to streaming, and today, I mean, we know what it is, the streaming marketplace. So the point I wanted to make, friends, was that, you have to create uncontested space. You have to have a blue ocean strategy mindset. And I think this is not only important for marketers, this is important for people who are formulating strategies in companies, people who are driving businesses, leaders who are leading their businesses. Think through, have a brainstorming as to what, and there are, there are a set of analytical tools and frameworks which can help you formulate and execute a blue ocean strategy. So it is not sort of very unstructured approach. It's a very scientific and a very analytical approach, and you can actually do that for your respective organizations. Now, just for marketers, steps in branding, I would elaborate it when I give the example of Tata Tiscon branding. But here, you have to understand your customer requirements. As I mentioned, latent needs, insights. You can't have desktop intuitions. You can't impose your perceptions on your customer. You have to understand customer requirements, for branding your commodity. And just, on the right hand side, if you see, it is coffee, salt, milk, oil, water. All these have been typical commodities, but they have been branded very successfully. So the message here is that anything can be branded. I recall when I was doing this retailing work for Tata Steel, and a very close reviewing was to be done by Mr. Muthu Raman, the then MD of Tata Steel. He used to say that, a shirt which we wear is a technologically very simple product, and it does not have very high consequences. So if you buy a wrong shirt, it is not going to have an impact on your life, So it is a very low involvement purchase, and people, shirt which costs 150 rupees can be sold for 5,000 rupees. So he said that steel is a very complex, technically complex product, and it has much higher ramifications. You can damage your house, or you can damage a bridge if the steel of the right quality is not used. He said, if the shirt can have 500% brand premium, why can't steel have that brand premium? So, commodities can be branded.
Hello.
You have to create value for customers. Branding and communicating the offer is important, wherein all this advertising and brand communication comes in. And then, of course, you have to ensure delivery of value. And friends, it looks so simple, just 4 steps. But each of these steps is a space of its own. It's a world of its own. So you have 10 kinds of marketing expertise in each of these, understanding consumer requirements and branding and communicating. So all of this is a very intricately involved process. But these are the broad things, and we have to align the whole system of a company towards fulfilling the brand. The next is the challenges that people face. So, developing insights with consumers is a challenge. Setting up a dedicated distribution is a challenge. Then communicating to customers and organizational commitment, because your entire organization needs to be committed. If your boss or if your management doesn't ask you the right questions, then you cannot brand your product. If still somebody asks the volumes and stuff like that, then I think you're in the commodity space. Very quickly, if you want to develop your brand and you want to find out what value I want to add to my customers, here is a chart. I would not dwell on it, and somebody, if he wants it, he can mail it to me. So if you are developing functional appeal for your product, you can check whether it integrates the customers, it connects the customers, it has a good quality, it avoids hassles and stuff like that. Emotional, whether it has any therapeutic value, it has any badge value. Badge values like Harley Davidson motorcycles, they have a badge value. So I'm not going into the details of this value pyramid, because this will be more required by practicing marketers who are into branding their products. But this is a good chart. This has been developed by Baines in one of the Harvard Business Review papers, but it gives you a very good starting point as to what are the tangible benefits or what are the intangible benefits that I can create for my customers. I mean, there are great learnings in this brand. So, for example, therapeutic value, which is related to health or wellness. So, can we position our brand on safety? Can we, say that, for example, the electrodes which I am marketing, can I have the USP as safety? Can the customer or sustainability? So things like that. If your product is related to society, if like many people say that 1 rupee out of all the sales proceed of my product goes for cancer research. So that actually comes into some life changing, self actualization, value. So I may be very, very pleased to buy a product which is actually doing a good social work, because therein I may have some sort of a self actualization, some sort of a self fulfilling feeling that I have done some good work in terms of supporting a cancer research. So this elements of a value pyramid developed by Baines, and this is a part of one of the HBR papers, but very, very useful for practicing marketeers. A brand should have an educative role in phase one, should have a tangible differentiation role, and emotional mind space in third phase. But phase 2 and 3 can also run parallelly. So it is not that you first complete your functional positioning and then you go to an emotional positioning. They can be done together. Now I will quickly give my Tata Discon experience. As was mentioned, I was a part of the first ever retail value management program done by Tata Steel. So there were a lot of myths. Before we went to the market, we were selling Saria, we were selling rebars, and rebars was a commodity. So typically the so-called desktop intuitions were that customer would not buy an expensive product. Why would customer pay extra for a rebar? After all, every rebar is okay for building a house. The second myth was that it is not a glamorous product. Customer doesn't bother about aesthetics because, after all, it goes inside a wall. The third was that customers, it's a very low involvement purchase. He doesn't even bother to, buy this rebar. He sends his masons or contractors. And it was felt that this product doesn't have an emotional appeal. But after we checked the consumer insights, and people who are into steel business and similar businesses, you see often what we speak is the dealer and the distributor language. Often all our insights are what the distributor or the dealer or the trader tells us. They are not the insights of the consumer. Because when we went to the consumer, he said that I build a house one in a lifetime. I can always change my TV, furniture, etc., but I can't change my rebar. But I do not know where to get a rebar from, so there is a lack of awareness. So the customer doesn't know from where to get Tata rebars. And then there's he said that I don't mind paying higher market price. And one of the concerns of the customer was that I don't get the right weighment because people cheat me while weighing the rebars. And they were also not aware about the technical aspects of the rebar. So based on this, you see, we created 3 major value propositions, which most of you would have seen posters. So one is that we advertised about appointment of authorized distributors. Tata Steel for the first time came up with recommended consumer price. And we also came up with electronic weighing scale, later on substituted by selling by piece. And so this was the first ever, ATL, Sahi Wazan, that is, you will not be cheated on weight, you will get the right price. And this is a very old communication of Tata Discon. Why I am showing this is that the customers' insights sometimes are very, very different from the insights what we feel are correct or what are given to us by our intermediaries. So be careful about that. These are all the stuff which was done at that time. We came up with functional, emotional appeal. I'm quickly running through this because some details I am willing to discuss later on. And you have to give a value to customers in terms of retail experience, in terms of all such stuff which was done. And lastly, you see, the thing like Discon was actually moved from a functional to an emotional sort of a platform. So this Atut Jod is not only a jod between a cement and a rebar, it also talks about a family bonding. It also talks about the people, the relationship of people. And today the brand is what many of us know about it. So the world's strongest brand, and I would take just 10 more minutes to finish my presentation. The brands excel at delivering benefits to customers they truly desire. This is basically example is Starbucks. They were earlier selling coffee. Later on, they set up these coffee shops, which gave a sense of romance and a sense of community to people. And this whole culture, which the Starbucks chairman says he borrowed from Italy, and he in fact said that the Starbucks had remained away from the heart and soul of coffee, what coffee had meant for to people for centuries. So you have to actually deliver benefits which customers truly desire. Starbucks did not deliver only coffee. They gave a sense of romance. They gave a sense of community feeling. They gave a sense of friendship to people who wanted to come to the Starbucks, bars and have coffee. The brand stays relevant. So, if you are selling a rural brand, you can't advertise a modern-looking hero in the brand communication. At the same time, the relevance also is what I described in terms of relevance in these days. So your brand should actually talk about things like sustainability, should talk about safety, should talk about business ethics, things which consumers by and large find relevant to today. It should not be, so it is both related to user imagery, usage imagery, as well as consumers' perception about what is right and what is wrong. I spoke about consumers' perception. Your pricing should be based on consumer perception and not on the cost of your product or the profit you are going to make in a product. It should be based on your consumer perception. And if your consumer perception is less than your cost, which means you have to sell at a loss, then it's high time you did something about your marketing and sales department and the entire team which is looking after a particular business or a product. The product should be properly positioned. Quick examples: Colgate positioning is protective. Patanjali, for example, talks about products being fully organic. Woodland talks about product being tough and perfect for outdoors. So, positioning is what is your top of the mind recall when you see a brand or when you hear about a brand. For example, Axe deodorants, they talk about, men's sexual appeal. So, whenever you think about Axe, you talk about, sensuality in men. So all this, Volvo, for example, has positioned its cars on safety. Their vision says that, in all accidents that happen in the world, very few involve a Volvo car. So that is a sort of a positioning which they have done. Your brand messaging should be very consistent. It should not happen that you start giving a very conflicting messages to the brand. I will take just half a minute to talk about this Michael Loeb brand. This was a beer brand. Now it is merged with the Budweiser group. But there's a classic example in 1970s. They said their tagline was, "Where you are going, it's Michael Loeb." They wanted people to not go anywhere and have Michael Loeb. Then they said weekends were made for Michael Loeb, so you should drink beers on weekends. Then they said quickly in 1970s, they said, put a little weekend in your week, which means you start drinking Michael Loeb brand beer during the week also. Then in 80s, because their sales was not going well, they said that the night belongs to Michael Loeb. Then in quick succession, they said some days are better than others. So like you could have it then they said a special day requires a special beer. Then they came up and some days were made for, the petty poor consumer got so confused. He had to look at his calendar and maybe out of a window, whether it is a day or a night, to decide whether he could have this Michael Loeb beer. And the company doomed. The company bombed, and it's a US based brand. Now they merged with the Budweiser group. But there's a classical example of how conflicting messages in a brand communication can harm your brand. Then your brand portfolio, should be very clearly defined. If you talk of brand portfolio, just see how beautifully PepsiCo has done it. They have Pepsi, Mirinda, 7-Up, Mountain Dew. Then they have Tropicana. Then they have Uncle Chips, Lay's, Kurkure. So beautiful brand portfolio with very well-defined brand communication. So this is very important if your brand has to succeed. Then you should have an integrated marketing strategy. So it should not only be about media advertising, it should be about maybe promotions. Like Coke said that if you return the bottle at some point in time, you will get some money back or something like that. Then it should be sponsorship, there should be interactive media, website games, you should have BTL activities, below the line activities. So it should be a completely integrated marketing strategy. Preferably, you should not stick to only one sort of brand communication media. The brand managers must understand what the brand means to the consumers. So quickly to give example, there is a French brand, Bic brand. They actually made those ballpoint pens, which were use and throw, a sort of ballpoint pens. They also made cigarette lighters. And the concept, the brand image in the eyes of customers was a use and throw and a very low end, very utilitarian sort of a image. And then they tried to launch a perfume brand in the same name, and also in small usable and throwable bottles, and it actually completely bombed because consumers, they relate the brand with certain thing. For example, Gillette, when they have their Gillette razors, when they came up with their toothbrushes, they actually launched Oral Care. Oral B was their brand. Of course, now it is with P&G, but they were very careful. They launched their electric razor under the Braun name. So, I mean, suppose, can you imagine using a toothbrush with a Gillette name? I mean, it will not gel with the consumers. So you have to be very sensitive, and you must understand what your brand means to your consumers. And last but not the least, the brand is not the job of the marketer. It is the job of the entire organization. It is the job of the CEO. It is the job of the CFO. It is the job of everyone in the organization. Because if you are not aligned, if you are not committed to the brand, if there is no sustained support coming from within the organization, then the brand would not do well. And last one is, it has to be monitored. You must know how customers rate your brand. You must do brand audits, and you must get brand equity reports about your brand. My last slide, some little gyan which I wanted to give in general. In today's times, please do not have that 1960s concept that you have to walk into each customer's premise to know about the insights of the customers. There are very powerful technologies, digital methods to understand and interact with customers. Please don't go back to the traditional old ways of meeting 2 customers per day, because you could only travel that much of a distance. You must have a modern and progressive method of connecting with your customers. Products and brands must be made subservient to customer relationship. I told you about this. Many companies have changed the names of their marketing department to customer department. The chief marketing officers are called chief customer officers. And I think this is extremely important, because you have to drive home the point that it is all about customers. If you do not have that mindset, you will actually never be able to construct a successful brand. Be curious. Talk to auto drivers and taxi drivers when you are traveling to take a feedback about whatever you can. Spend time with customers and channel members by using powerful technologies. I did not mean that you physically, I mean, notwithstanding current COVID-19 times, but you have to interact with customers and channel members in person also. But that should not lead you to think that I will interact with 500 customers within next 3 years, and then I will chalk out my brand strategy. So you can always meet customers to take a brand feedback, but employ digital platforms to interact with customers, but meet them personally also. And this N is equal to 1 is a very powerful concept again. And this was, I must say, in one of my interactions with Mr. Bhaskar Bhatt, who has been the ex-MD of Titan. He talks about N is equal to 1. He says, talk to one consumer. He will tell you 5 needs. Come back, meet and fulfill those needs. You don't require a great market research to find out and then go on to 10 number of customers, then go on to 100 customers. But if you are able to satisfy that one customer which you have met, I think you are on the right track and your brand is on the right track. So we often feel that this customer is very unreasonable. He told me 20 things. Obviously, I am not able to do that. No, but at least he would have told you 5 things which you can do. Please do that before you start talking of, big market research or big platforms. Then continuously upgrade yourself. If you know, friends, anything which you had learnt more than 3 years back, please be sure whether that learning is still relevant. Learning, unlearning, and relearning, and this is not relevant to only marketing and sales or branding, but this is learning. I always feel knowledge is a learning disability. It is like a cup full of tea. So your tea has become cold. You can't have another cup till such time you empty this cold tea. Knowledge is like this tea which is hot within 3 years time and it becomes cold if it is more than 3 years. You have to unlearn it. You have to empty the cold teacup. Only then you can fill new knowledge. And hence learning, unlearning and relearning is something which is very important. I'm always of the opinion that, youngsters who join organizations are very knowledgeable and they have a lot of more relevant knowledge than what many of us who are experienced have. And, hence we must respect people's knowledge, even if they don't have experience. But we must remember that sometimes knowledge is a great liability. Please, many a times these days when people want to appoint business partners, they look at less experienced people. And a guy, if he says, I am doing this business for generations, my father used to do this, my grandfather used to do this, I think it is more of a disqualification rather than a qualification, until and unless that person is willing to unlearn. So this is a very important thing for us to know. Insanity is doing same things over and over again and expecting different results. You see, we often, if our product has not sold, we will again do the same thing next month. We will not come up with new experiments, with new pilots. And talking of pilots, you see, one of my great learning is that pilots should be done quickly and frequently. And you must be prepared to fail in pilots. Don't fail at scale. And pilot budget should not be constrained. So you want to pilot, say you want to pilot a new packaging for your product. Just do some 3-4 pilots, test it out, how different packaging can help or not help customers. And then decide which is the final packaging, but don't fail at scale. Check out the cost of success. You may not go ahead with a pilot. If the cost is too high, don't scale up. And, just go on doing things. Time is of essence. These days, in 5 years, companies are taking birth and disappearing. So perfection is the enemy of progress. Run experiments cheaply and quickly. Be approximately correct than precisely wrong. So I think organizations must understand that they have to be flexible, they have to be responsive, they have to develop the speed of execution. And for that, this entire concept of piloting and failing in pilots and not failing at scale is extremely important, particularly so in marketing and sales. Marketers should be business managers first. They must be focused on growth and financial results. A lot of CMOs positions are in danger worldwide. Many chief marketing officers are actually losing their roles to other departments, maybe partly to CFO, partly to the strategy manager, partly maybe to some procurement guy or a supply chain guy. So marketers must transition from a brand and communication role to a data-driven commercial leadership. And I think this is extremely important. No more are marketers and brand managers seen to be guys who are only developing advertisements or TV clips. And this is not that. You have to understand, you have to know about the Wall Street as much as about the Main Street. You must understand the business, the profitability and everything. You must talk in terms of customer equity. You must talk in terms of customer lifetime value. And hence, for marketers in this session, it is extremely important to expand your roles if you have not done so till now. Hunger model approach is something which I am very attracted to. It says that even if you give zero budget to an activity, most of the time it ends up getting done. People, the constraints are liberating. So somebody is doing a job at 100 rupees, you cut down the budget to 50 rupees. For all you know, the job can be done better. I'm not saying that make all budgeting zero. Many mobile companies particularly are actually utilizing customers as an asset to sort out the quality complaints of other customers. So you see, you will write that I am finding this problem in my mobile, and some other customer will sort out your problem. That is a very subtle way how the mobile companies are actually solving customer complaints. So free of cost. So you can actually design your actions on zero budgeting concept, and then build up budgets, because one of the things which marketers always crave for is that I want huge budgets, I want X crores for EV ads and Y crores for press ads. So I don't think so that is the right way of going forward. See to it what is most effective, and have a hunger model approach, and always remember that constraints are liberating. And many of us have seen during these difficult COVID-19 times that when we had so much of constraints of physical movements and all, many jobs are being done far more better than what we used to do when we actually used to go physically to offices. So I think this is a great thing to imbibe. Just always remember that constraints must be appreciated and must be liberated. And the last, for marketers, lead indicators. I spoke of customer lifetime value, cost per acquisition, customer acquisition, customer attrition rate. These are all lead indicators. And please come out of as much as possible of lag indicators like market share, revenue, EBITDA. These are important. I think companies won't do without indicators like revenue and EBITDA. But I think the efficacy of the activities, how you are approaching the entire process of branding and entire process of building customer relationship must be measured by lead indicators, which I have given a few of them, but I'm willing to discuss them in detail offline if someone of you is interested. But if still anyone is only focusing on lag indicators, then it's high time. And this is for the management of companies. I mean, they should change their mindset from sheer lag indicators to lead indicators. Last but not the least, famous saying of Jeff, brand for a company is like a reputation. You earn reputation by trying to do hard things well. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience.
Thank you very much, sir. The session is now open for any questions. I request the participants to unmute themselves and ask them one by one.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
This is Amit Sahu, and I had privilege of working under you for a few years at SWP.
Yeah, Amit.
Yeah. So, sir, my question here is: you told about a proposition wherein you should get the proposition right at the first customer level, n equals to 1. Now, my question here is, sir, like when we go to a customer and then we identify that there are 5 needs, and as a marketer we really know that time and growth are 2 fundamentals that we should look at. So is it okay to satisfy only 2 pressing needs out of the 5? Like how should the trade-off be done between the growth and satisfaction here?
Yeah, Amit, you see, obviously there is no product or there is no brand which can satisfy all the needs of the customers. Ideally, yes, if you could satisfy all the needs, but the more the better. And when I said n is equal to 1, that was more in terms of collecting customer insights. I did not mean that if the customer has 5 insights, you have to satisfy all. Because this is also important, because while satisfying customer needs, you also need to see your intrinsic capabilities and your capability growth plans. So you should also not make false commitments to the customers. The beauty of the whole branding process lies in reconciling your customer needs with your capabilities of the present and of the future. So you are right, absolutely, that it is, you can start with satisfying 1 need, you can start with satisfying 2 needs, but going forward, you must keep the needs in your radar, so that whenever possible, you must be able to address as many needs as possible. And no brand is able to satisfy customers 100%. The more you can, the better it is.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
I had given my mail ID also in my last slide. I'll see if I can display it at the end. It is neerajkant1708 at gmail.com. So if someone of you can ask me questions offline, also mailing to me, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Good afternoon, sir. I am Siddharth Banerjee. I am RM Retail, looking after retail area of Steel Authority in Eastern region.
Yeah, Siddharth.
Basically, I wanted to know that in the retail sector, with the approach of so many players in both primary and secondary, what is happening? We are having lot of influencer management system by the competitors, and what is happening that now in case of individual house building sector, what you said that yes, we have to educate the customers and things like that, but entire quantity, the volume that is to be sold through retail, so many if we only consider individual house building sector, some of the material is going to small projects also, where what is happening, things are more influenced apart from quality, the product which is being pushed by the influencers like masons, engineers, architects and dealers. So how do you tackle such issues where apart from quality, people are more interested in the influencing system or the commission system that is being inflicted?
Yeah, Siddharth, you have asked a very pertinent question. You see, I would just respond with maybe a few comments. One is that you have to be very clear on your customer segmentation. So, you can't say that I have produced a product and now, some of it is going to house builders, some of it is going to projects, or some of it is going to large projects. You have to be very clear that which of my product is targeted to which of these segments, because these segments may have very drastically different needs. The project segment may have entirely different set of needs compared to a house building segment. A project segment may not be able to develop an emotional connect with you, because a builder will make houses and sell it to people, while an individual house builder may have that emotional connect with the product. So that is one. So you actually cannot mix up with the entire segmentation process. So be very clear which product you are talking and which segment. Even the product, if you are talking of rebar, you don't normally sell a 32 mm or a 40 mm rebar to a house builder segment, or typically a 6 mm or a 8 mm rebar. In very small quantities may go to projects, but largely it is going to a small house builder. So you have to do this exercise very carefully, and this is a very involved and a very scientific exercise, and you must understand what are the needs you are addressing of the house builder and what are the needs you are addressing for the project. So that is one. Coming back to influencers, you see, you have that is why we use the word stakeholders. So you have to have insights of your stakeholders. And influencers, why are influencers influencing today? Because the customer doesn't know much about the product and his involvement is very less. If you can create a brand pull, you see Intel Inside. How many people buying computers would have a detailed understanding of Intel processor? But many would ask, Intel hai ki kya hai? So there are two ways. If your customer is not very, very knowledgeable, which you should make an effort to make him knowledgeable over a period of time. But if he is not knowledgeable, you have to deal with stakeholders. And stakeholders, I strongly feel that again, it is a very, very incorrect myth that commissions, help architects or somebody recommend your products. Commissions may be there or may not be there. I don't know, but it is because your product is not, uh, demanding or is not enjoying a pull from the customer side. Your product has not uh, connected, not emotionally, but in terms of tangible and intangible benefits with your influencers. So there are many architects who would claim a lot of pride in saying that they only recommend X cement and Y rebar because they feel that adds to their reputation. So some small time guys may be giving commission. I don't know, but that is not where the focus should be about. The focus should be on properly segmenting, then creating a pull from the customer so that the customer starts telling. Tell me why the architect is or the interior designer is not able to influence when the same customer goes and buys a TV or buys a fridge, then the housewife will have a say. Because she will say, I want this size of TV or I want this size of refrigerator. Because perhaps, the involvement is less. You have to, as a brand, you have to increase the involvement of the consumers in your brand through effective branding. You have to create a pull so that the customer starts asking the architect, which cement have you used? I want you to use this cement. These days, a lot of customers do a Google research and come to architects, no, I want this product. So these are all myths, Siddharth, that, a sale cannot happen because, X and Y has not paid commission to a mason or to an architect. I think it is an easy way, it is an easy explanation for not doing the harder work, in the Jeff Bezos quote. You have to do things the harder way. Creating a pull from the customer is much more difficult. Creating intangible connect with the influencers is much more difficult. Rather than saying that, some commission has been paid and hence a product has been paid. So, I hope I have answered your question, but we can connect more on it at any point in time later.
Okay, thank you so much.
I think we can take one last question or else we can, Asmita, we can close.
Yeah, so there is one question from Sweetie Agarwal, BSO Bangalore. It's in the chat window. She says, like SAIL has come up with a new brand for SAIL TMT for retail segment. We are in the process of appointing distributors all over India to appoint retailers in the market. What should be our step for branding a product?
I think, Smita, if you have checked my steps for branding, I can't particularly sort of advise SAIL. It's a great company. It is my ex-company. I am in no position to give you specific advice. I mean, you guys have done a great job in branding several products. But in my presentation, I had touched upon some very basic steps for branding commodities and some challenges, in branding of commodities. If you can go through those steps in detail, if you can go through the value pyramid, you will get a lot of answers. But I am happy to connect, at any point in time. But I understand a lot of SAIL officers have got connected. I must say that SAIL has done a great job over the years, and it's a great company. I mean, a lot of things we need to learn from all of you. But more detailed discussion we can have offline later at any point in time.
Okay, thank you, sir. I think that answers the question. Any more questions from the participants? We can take one last question.
Hello.
Yes.
Sir, I am Ritesh Pandya from Tata BlueScope Steel.
Yeah,
I have one question. Like you explained us about customer perceived value of our product, And can you relate this with product life cycle? Because when one's product is launched, if number of entrants are less, then we get the premium from the market. But when number of entrant increases and product reaches its growth or maturity stage, then it is very difficult to get a premium from the market. And customer perceived value of that product also decreases. So can you relate the product life cycle with the customer perceived value, sir, and how to retain those customers? That is my question.
Yeah, there's a very good question, Ritesh. Actually, if you see the calculation of CLV, which is customer lifetime value, it is related to three things. One is basically the margin which the customer is giving to you. Secondly, it is the lifetime, the length of the relationship with which you want to connect with the customer. And the third is the discounting rate. So let's not get into the discounting rate part of it. That is more of a finance job. So look at two things: the profitability and the lifetime. Now, what you have said is very correct. So you can have a lifetime relationship of 5 years with a customer. You can have a lifetime relationship of 10 years. You can have with 20 years. So it all depends on your product life cycle. So if your product life cycle is 3 years, you can't have a customer relationship or a customer lifetime value calculation based on 5 years of relationship. So as you have correctly pointed out, when you are calculating customer lifetime value, you have to factor in the customer, the length with which you will that product will remain connected with that customer, and you will have to bring in calculations of your customer product cycle. So for example, when Apple must be doing their customer lifetime value, and this is my presumption, I don't know what Apple is doing, but they must be calculating the profit. So there are loyal Apple customers, so they must be calculating the profit which they have got in the first 2 months. Then they would be calculating the profits which they would get over subsequent years, because their profits are going down because they are reducing their prices of their new models. And maybe in the third year, when they are phasing out the model, they must be doing very little sales. So this entire calculation gets factored into customer lifetime value calculations, and hence this KPI is an extremely important KPI, and this should be measured. And what you are saying, you can have a strategy that I will launch at a very high price, and I will then come down. And some brands do it the other way around, that I will launch at a lesser price, though I feel this is more of a difficult strategy. But then that is a strategy which even Tata Tiscon followed. They launched at a very less brand premium and then went on building the brand premium. So these are options available to marketers, but the product life cycle is very intricately involved in the calculation of customer lifetime value. I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Sir, I have one question.
Yeah, please introduce yourself. Yeah.
Sir, myself Sonu Tanwar. I am a retail marketing officer with Steel Authority of India.
Yeah.
Sir, I have one question there. Now we were talking about building a brand. Giving an example of an Apple phone, who is selling say 40,000 rupees phone at an amount at a value of 1 lakh rupees. But there is another example of Samsung also, like a product like Steel, which is very very costly for people in rural areas. We are actually in retail marketing, we are targeting. Can't we have something like Samsung? Can't we think to have something like Samsung, which have a phone at a higher end of 80,000 also, and a product which is targeting a lower end customer to have a phone with say 8 to 10,000. How would you take this kind of a strategy?
So one is that how do you get this insight that a rebar is a costly product for rural areas? Is there a research? As far as I know, one of the research says that the most expensive brands of TV are sold actually in rural areas. and a lot of expensive products are sold in rural areas. So again, Ritesh, coming back to the insights. So these are desktop intuitions that गांव में सस्ता माल बिकता है. Where is the research to support this? You have very rich people living in villages, or very brand conscious people living in villages also. So that is my first response to you. The second response is, let me finish, then I'll take your counter question. The second response the second response is that you can always position your product at any stage on the value chain. So nobody says, so I mean, Samsung has its own strategy, and Apple has its own strategy. Apple could increase the POV of the product so that people are buying at 1 lakh. Samsung couldn't do it, so hats off to it. That is why it is the most valued brand in the world, Apple. But there's nobody's case. You can always position your brand. You can see what is the POV of your product. So again, you are, if you consciously want to, suppose your manufacturing cost is 10,000 and you don't want to position it at 70,000, you want to position it at 30,000. So you have to create a POV for 30,000. And then you have to work towards selling that 10,000 rupees product at 30,000. Now, you see, again, your question has inbuilt overlapping of price and POV. So you're talking of a certain price, which is very high for the rural people, because you have not created a POV higher than your price in the rural areas. And POV is all about branding. It is nothing to do. I mean, Tata Tiscon brand, which is the most expensive rebar brand, is bought by some of the poorest people in rural areas. So these are all myths, Ritesh. So don't think that anything is right till such time either you directly ratify with many customers or you have a proper research on that.
Certainly,
Yeah.
I may have to do some proper research, because we have some strategy of doing gaon ki or, where we go to gaons and villages and rural areas and give presentation on product, on sale product, sale TLT, where I got these questions as your product is good. They always say that your product is good, but the value that you are asking is something very high. So maybe I'm not.
So
I need to do.
check from the value pyramid and the differentiation matrix on what all metrics you are putting a tick mark. So I gave a differentiation matrix and I gave a element of value pyramids. Just check on how many parameters your product. Do a small research, and then you will find out what kind of value you have been able to offer to your customer. Right? So we can discuss more on this offline.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So I think we have come to the end of the session. So thank you very much, sir, for your time and a very informative session. And I also thank all the participants for the cooperation and a huge response. To get this recording, please drop a mail to the mail ID mentioned in the chat box. Also, you can find the recording on YouTube, on JMA's YouTube channel. And for our upcoming events, please follow Jamshedpur Management Association on social media. So thank you, and see you in next session. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks all of you. Thank you, Basmati.